On a chilly afternoon in late October 1981, three young boys stumbled across something no child should ever have to see. The body of a teenager, face up in the mud, arms stretched unnaturally to each side, in a shallow ravine behind a warehouse in suburban Cleveland. His name was Kurt Sova. He was 17. He had vanished 5 days earlier, after attending a house party just a few blocks away. His body showed no visible wounds, no signs of a struggle, no cause of death. And yet the autopsy revealed something that would upend everything. Kurt had only been dead for about a day, meaning he'd been alive for nearly 4 days after he disappeared. In the weeks that followed, more strange details surfaced. A neighbor claimed to have seen Kurt alive 3 days after the party, climbing into a van. A party host called Kurt's mother out of nowhere, saying someone might be asleep in her basement. Then came the stranger in the record store, the one who claimed to know exactly when and where Kurt would be found. For more than 40 years, the death of Kurt Sova has remained one of Ohio's most disturbing cold cases. No arrests, no charges, no answers. Welcome to Bad Things. Join us as we retrace Kurt's final days, unpack every theory, and examine, step by step, what most likely happened. Kurt Eugene Sova was the kind of kid parents didn't worry about. He was responsible, dependable, and not known for getting into trouble. At just 17, he had already earned the trust of his family enough that when he said he'd be home by 10:30, they believed him, because he always was. He lived in Newborough Heights, a small suburb nestled just outside of Cleveland, Ohio. The neighborhood was tightly knit, a place where people generally knew each other's routines. Kurt lived there with his parents, Dorothy and Ken Sova, and his siblings. He was a student at Marymount High School, and by all accounts, not someone who drank heavily or used drugs. In fact, those who knew him were shocked when they later learned that he'd been drinking grain alcohol on the day he disappeared. That wasn't the Kurt they knew. Friday, October 23rd, 1981. The party and the disappearance. It started like a normal Friday. Kurt skipped school, a bit unusual for him, and spent the day with friends. More out of character was what he drank. Everclear, a 190 proof grain alcohol. Witnesses later said he seemed more intoxicated than they'd ever seen. That evening he ran into Sam Carroll, who was heading to a party nearby. Kurt tagged along. The gathering, held at a duplex on Harvard Avenue, was small but lively. Several people confirmed seeing Kurt drinking heavily and eventually getting sick. Sam helped him outside for air, left briefly to grab jackets, and returned to find Kurt gone. He said he was only gone 2 or 3 minutes, recalled Dorothy Sova, but by the time he came back, Kurt had vanished. Sam searched a bit, then went back inside, assuming Kurt had left, but he never came home. It wasn't like him to stay out overnight, Dorothy later said. I knew something was wrong. Saturday to Sunday, October 24th to 25th. The search begins. By Saturday, the Sovases began searching relentlessly. Ken drove the streets, Dorothy called friends, hung missing posters, and searched ravines, schoolyards, even dumpsters. They filed a missing person report Sunday, but felt police weren't taking it seriously. That afternoon, Dorothy learned Kurt had been at a party on Harvard Avenue. She confronted Debbie Sams, who initially denied it, but after a pizza delivery confirmed the party happened, Debbie admitted Kurt had been there, drank heavily, got sick, and then vanished. That's when I think I became hysterical, Dorothy said. I thought, my God, something happened to him at that party. Monday, October 26th. The van and the stranger. On Monday, Kurt's friend David Trusnick reported seeing him walking with another boy. Before David could stop, a van pulled up and Kurt shouted, "Franco," before jumping in. If I'd known he was missing, David later said, I could have followed the van. Some believe Franco was Craig Franco, a gas station worker who died months later, though the connection remains unclear. That same day, a strange man entered a record store, pointed at Kurt's missing poster and said, "They're going to find him in 2 days." The next morning, the same man reportedly left a bouquet of flowers and a note outside the store. The note read, "Roses are red, the sky is blue. They found him dead, and they'll find you too." He was briefly detained by police but ultimately released. Authorities concluded he had no connection to Kurt's disappearance. Still, his eerily accurate prediction became one of the case's many bizarre footnotes. Tuesday, October 27th, the basement call. Sometime on Tuesday, Debbie Sams phoned the Sovas. Her message was cryptic. She said someone might be sleeping on a cot in her basement, and it could be Kurt. Dorothy was baffled. "I thought, why are you calling me now after lying to me so many times?" she later said. Ken rushed to the duplex. When he arrived, the basement was empty, but the cot looked recently used, the blanket still rumpled. "I thought maybe he was sick or hurt, and I figured if I got down there and found him, maybe I could do something for him," Ken recalled. "Instead, I found an empty cot. All I know is somebody did sleep in that cot that night, and when I got there, they were gone." Dorothy would later say, "I think he was already dead in that cot. They panicked and got rid of his body in that ravine." Wednesday, October 28th. Kurt is found. That afternoon, 3 local boys were exploring a ravine behind a furniture warehouse near Harvard Avenue when they discovered a body lying in shallow water. It was Kurt. He was found face up, wearing the same clothes he'd had on the night of the party. One shoe was missing entirely. The other was found wedged in nearby rocks. His body showed no signs of major trauma. No stab wounds, no bullet wounds, no broken bones. Just minor abrasions. Most haunting of all, the ravine had already been searched by Kurt's father. "I know he wasn't there the day that I was searching," Ken Sova said. "They must have dumped him off that evening. I looked around and I'm sure that if Kurt was down there, I would have noticed that bright yellow t-shirt that he had on." Lieutenant Robert Karras of the Newburgh Heights Police later said, "It's our belief that his body was dumped out there and whoever did it knew the area, so eventually, within a certain amount of time, he would be found." Autopsy results and a lingering mystery. Kurt's autopsy was performed by Dr. Lester Adelson, Chief Deputy Coroner for Cuyahoga County. The results only deepened the mystery. There were no signs of homicide. His blood alcohol level was 0.11%, not high enough to kill a healthy teenager outright, especially with no drugs found in his system. His internal organs showed no disease or rupture. There were no signs of assault or strangulation. The coroner estimated that Kurt died within 24 to 36 hours before his body was found. In other words, Kurt was likely alive until Monday or Tuesday, several days after his disappearance. In the official report, his cause of death was listed as instantaneous physiological death, a term often used when no other explanation can be found. The manner of death? Probable accident. As Dr. Adelson explained, quoting Sherlock Holmes, "You eliminate all other possibilities, and that which remains is the truth." But the Sovas were not satisfied. "I didn't believe that they couldn't tell me how Kurt died," Dorothy said. "For my peace of mind, I want to know what happened to my boy." February 1982. Another death. More questions. 3 months later, another local boy turned up dead. Eugene Kvet, 13, lived just a block from the Sovas and was said to have known Kurt. He went missing in January 1982. On February 1st, his body was found in a ravine off Harvard Avenue, less than 3 miles from where Kurt had been found. Like Kurt, Eugene had no clear cause of death. His right shoe was missing, just as in Kurt's case. The autopsy found injuries consistent with a fall, but could not determine if it was an accident or foul play. Police never found a link between the two deaths. but the similarities haunted the community. The case goes cold, then reopens. In the years that followed, Kurt's case remained cold, officially unsolved but never closed. In 2019, Newburgh Heights Police Chief John Majoy reopened the file, partnering with local college students and outside investigators. In 2020, the case was featured at CrimeCon's CrowdSolve event, a national forum aimed at reigniting interest in cold cases. But even now, more than 4 decades later, no one has been arrested. The death of Kurt Sova remains a mystery, one with too many strange details to ignore and too few hard facts to solve. Number 1. Accidental death, no foul play. This was the official theory early on. Kurt, drunk on Everclear, wandered off from the party and died from exposure, a fall, or a hidden medical issue. His 0.11% BAC wasn't lethal on its own, but combined with cold temperatures, hypothermia was possible. Chief John Majoy still leans toward accidental death, citing the lack of trauma or foul play. But this theory struggles with timing. Kurt's body wasn't in the ravine when first searched, and as Ken Sova insists, he wasn't there on Tuesday. I looked. If he died later, the question remains, where was he? Number 2. Accidental death with a cover-up. Party panic theory. A more layered theory suggests Kurt's death wasn't intentional, but the cover-up was. He may have overdosed or passed out at the party, and instead of calling for help, the others panicked. Fearing legal trouble, they hid him, possibly in the basement cot Debbie Sams later mentioned, and hoped he'd recover. When he didn't, they dumped his body in the nearby ravine. This could explain Debbie's shifting story, the Tuesday basement call, the delayed body discovery, and the missing shoe. Kevin Sova believes this is what happened. I truly, in my gut, think that he just died and they panicked. It's a theory supported by many online sleuths and even police, but it relies on the idea that several people kept a secret for decades, and leaves questions about why the autopsy found no signs of overdose, trauma, or aspiration. Number 3. Foul play by an unknown assailant. Another theory rejects the idea of an accident entirely, suggesting Kurt was murdered, possibly by someone outside the party. Central to this is the van sighting on Monday, where David Trusnick saw Kurt call out Franco and get into a van. That may have been Craig Franco, a local acquaintance who died soon after. Could Kurt have been held somewhere and later killed or left to die? Some point to the record store stranger who eerily predicted Kurt's body would be found in 2 days. Police dismissed him as unstable, but the timing was chilling. Still, the theory lacks a clear motive, and with no signs of violence, the idea of deliberate murder remains hard to prove. Number 4. The serial offender theory, the Cavett connection. In February 1982, just 3 months after Kurt's death, 13-year-old Eugene Cavett was found dead in another ravine, also missing for days, also missing his right shoe. He lived a block from Kurt, and the two knew each other. The parallels sparked talk of a possible pattern, a hidden predator, perhaps even someone in authority. But no one was ever charged, the deaths were never officially linked, and no similar cases followed. Theories linger, but no hard evidence has ever surfaced. Number 5. Police mishandling or cover-up. Some argue the real mystery isn't how Kurt died, but why no one was held responsible. The Newburgh Heights police were in disarray at the time. One officer later jailed, the chief convicted for unrelated misconduct. According to Chief Majoy, the case wasn't handled very well. Leads like Debbie's basement call, the van sighting, and the record store stranger weren't seriously pursued. Whether due to incompetence, bias, or quiet avoidance, early missteps may have doomed the investigation. As one writer put it, the truth might have been there in 1981, but nobody looked close enough. By process of elimination, the simplest explanation, the one that best aligns with the evidence and requires the fewest assumptions, is this. Kurt Sova died from an accidental overdose or medical complication at or shortly after the Harvard Avenue party, and his body was hidden and later dumped in the ravine by people trying to avoid legal consequences. This theory doesn't account for everything. There are gaps, contradictions, and unanswered questions. But viewed as a whole, it fills more blanks than any other version of events, and remains the scenario most consistent with the timeline, the behavior of those involved, and the limited physical evidence. Let's begin with how Kurt most likely died. We know Kurt drank Everclear, a 190 proof grain alcohol, on the day of the party. That is a powerful substance, capable of causing blackouts, vomiting, respiratory depression, and death in high doses, especially in someone with a low tolerance. His blood alcohol content at autopsy was 0.11%, which is high but not lethal. However, that number reflects his level at the time of death, not necessarily the peak level hours or days earlier. If Kurt had been drinking earlier and his body metabolized some of the alcohol, his BAC may have dropped before he died. Also, BAC tests in 1981 didn't account for other substances unless specifically ordered. If Kurt ingested another depressant, whether a pill someone gave him, or even just cold medicine or sedatives mixed with alcohol, it could have led to respiratory failure, aspiration, or cardiac arrest, all of which might leave few obvious signs on autopsy. Dr. Lester Adelson, the coroner, ultimately listed the cause of death as instantaneous physiological death, a term that, while vague, usually indicates a body simply stopped functioning with no clear trauma. In modern forensic terms, that's often seen in cases of overdose, asphyxia, or electrical cardiac disturbances. Opportunity. Kurt's last confirmed location was the Harvard Avenue duplex party on Friday, October 23rd. The hosts and attendees had the means, opportunity, and time to be present when Kurt became ill or unresponsive. He wasn't a stranger at the party, but he wasn't close friends with everyone there either. He had tagged along with Sam Carroll, who helped him outside briefly. After that, no one claimed to see him again. Sam said he went to grab a jacket and came back 2 or 3 minutes later to find Kurt missing. It's plausible that in that short window, Kurt wandered or collapsed. What likely followed was panic. If the hosts or attendees saw Kurt passed out and couldn't wake him, they may have assumed the worst. The decision not to call for help may have stemmed from fear. Fear of being blamed, fear of being arrested, fear of someone dying on their property. This wasn't a group known for maturity. Dorothy Sova later said, "They lied from the beginning, and then they called and said, 'There's someone sleeping in our basement.' They knew something." It's difficult to imagine a truly innocent reason for that call. There was no logical reason for someone to intentionally kill Kurt Sova. He wasn't involved in gangs. He didn't have enemies. There was no ransom, no violence, and no apparent motive for murder. But covering up a death, that happens far more often than people realize, especially among scared teenagers or young adults. As Kevin Sova later put it, "I truly believe he died at that house, and they panicked." Course of events. Here's how it likely unfolded. Friday evening. Kurt drinks heavily at the Harvard Avenue party. At some point, he becomes violently ill and either collapses or passes out. The partygoers initially assume he'll sleep it off. But at some point, likely overnight or early Saturday, he either stops breathing, chokes on vomit, or goes into cardiac arrest. Instead of calling for help, the group panics. Believing he is dead, they decide to hide him temporarily, likely in the basement, on the cot later described by Debbie Sams. Over the weekend, they either leave his body in place or consider moving him elsewhere. It's possible Kurt was still alive for part of this time, barely conscious but untreated. On Monday, David Trusnick reported seeing someone who looked like Kurt getting into a van. For this theory to hold, we have to assume Trusnick may have misidentified him, which, in this context, seems more likely. If it really was Kurt, alert and calling out to his friend Franco, the rest of our theory doesn't hold. On Tuesday, Debbie calls Dorothy Sova, saying someone might be in her basement. This is a key moment. The call could represent guilt, fear, or an attempt to shift blame. Ken Sova arrives within hours and finds the basement empty, but the cot looks recently used. All I know is somebody did sleep in that cot that night, and when I got there, they were gone. Ken Sova. That night, Tuesday into early Wednesday, Kurt's body is dumped in the ravine, just 500 yards from the party house. It's a location the Sovas had already searched, giving the illusion that he'd died there. They must have dumped him off that evening, Ken later told reporters. That shirt would have stood out. I know he wasn't there when I searched. The body was laid face up, not hidden, not buried. It was almost as if the people who placed him there wanted him to be found, but hoped the cold and water would obscure any useful evidence. And it did. Why no one talked? If Kurt died among people he knew, why has no one come forward? The answer is likely fear, guilt, and the passage of time. If those involved were 18 or 19 in 1981, they'd be in their 60s today. Coming forward now could expose them to legal or civil consequences. And as the years passed, the chance to tell the truth diminished. Shame can be a powerful silencer. The reality is that if Kurt had received medical attention that night, he may have survived. If the partygoers had made one phone call, his family wouldn't have spent decades asking the same question. Instead, they were met with silence. "I just want to know what happened to my boy," Dorothy Sova said. "That's all I ever wanted." The death of Kurt Sova was most likely an accidental overdose or alcohol-related death, and the real crime was in what came next: the failure to help, the effort to hide it, and the cowardice of those who chose to stay silent. The people who were with Kurt in those final days, whoever they were, made a series of choices that robbed a family of the truth. They may have avoided arrest, but they left behind a legacy of heartbreak. "He came up missing, then he came up dead," Kurt's brother Kevin once said. "And we still don't know why."